So, Yali Madad to everybody. We would be starting shortly in a couple of minutes. Would request if you have friends who are wanting to join this webinar, please feel free to ask them to join because this would be an interactive one. Of course, we'll be talking about a great geography. Study abroad is something that we always look forward to. So we'll be starting shortly. Please feel free to add your friends and request them to join. We have around 30 attendees right now. So Anis, hello. Right. So looks like it's time for the event. So we can start off. Yes, all. So Yalimadad everyone. Thank you again for joining in for another series of Udan webinar, where we would talk about what it is to study abroad. Today, we're going to talk and chat about two beautiful countries with great people, Australia and New Zealand. Before I introduce the speakers for today, let us be aligned on the ground rules. So since this is a webinar, you would not be having the opportunity to talk, but yes, you can share your questions in the Q&A window, which is on the bottom of the screen on the right side. If you want to chat, there is also a chat window, so use it appropriately. All the questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A because that's where we'll be looking for Q&A and sharing your questions with the speakers for today. And of course, we'll be taking it in a sequential manner. So if you have queries first, feel free to put in and we'll take that up as and when it comes. So that's about the ground rules. If required, we'll also unmute you and let you talk. So do not worry about that. And we have ample amount of time today for the webinar. So use it judiciously. So that's about the ground rules. First of all, to start off, I would like to thank the Haka Education Board for Australia and New Zealand for collaborating with us on this opportunity. We are privileged to kick off this series of webinars. And with that, let me introduce our star speakers for today. We have Nazim Bhimani. So Nazim is a tertiary education and early Career Development Board member of the Haka Education Board for Australia and New Zealand. Professionally, Nazim works in medical research as a biostatistician for the gastrointestinal department at Royal North Shore Hospital, Sydney. Nazim is currently undertaking a part-time PhD in medicine from the University of Sydney, Australia. So that's our first speaker, quite heavy profile. The second speaker for today is Shahzad Lakhani, who's a core member at the Arkan Education Board for Australia and New Zealand. Shehzad is an application and sales engineer, supplying products and services to the railway industry. He has a bachelor's degree in mechatronics engineering. So we welcome Nazim sir and Shehzad to the webinar. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Rinkesh. Yalmad, everyone. My name is Nazim. Shehzad, I think you might be on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, everyone. My name is Shahzad.
Thank you for such a warm welcome, Rinkesh. On behalf of the Aga Khan Education Board for Australia and New Zealand, I'd like to thank India for inviting us to deliver this webinar. We understand that there's a lot of interest in studying overseas in countries such as Australia and New Zealand, and we hope that the information that we provide in this webinar and the webinars to come as part of this series will provide you a foundation of information and resources to then dive in and conduct further research of your own. For your reference, we've also created some detailed handbooks on settling and living in Australia and New Zealand, which dives much deeper into the information that we will deliver in this webinar series. Next slide, please. So just to give everyone a bit of an overview of this webinar and the entire series that we're looking to deliver. So this webinar itself is all about the post-secondary or tertiary landscape that we have for Australia and New Zealand. So during this webinar, we'll cover the qualification frameworks that we have in place for Australia and New Zealand, how to go about preparing for your studies, some general information on the costs or some guidelines on the costs of studying, the admission requirements, and how to go about applying to a tertiary institution. We also have a guest speaker with us as well, an international student who's kindly agreed to sort of share his experience of studying here. So that's just a bit of an overview of this particular webinar. And then the two webinars to follow on from here, we've got, we'll have Monash Lakhani, who's the Social Welfare Council member for Australia and New Zealand, who'll be delivering the second webinar, which is all about living and settling in ANZ. And then we'll have webinar 3, which is a Career Horizons panel discussion. And I'll talk a little bit later on about that. But what it is we'll get professionals who have essentially migrated from India to Australia and New Zealand and have established themselves. And we'll sort of share their experience of, migrating and studying in Australia and New Zealand and how they've sort of gone about with their careers and how they've established themselves as well. Next slide, please. So just a bit of a disclaimer as we kick things off. The information that we provide in this webinar is very general, and it's meant to serve as a guide only. Please note that, Shehzad and I, we're not migration agents or education advisors. If you're looking to get some further information, please feel free to reach out to us, but, professional advice should also be gained, when considering your individual circumstances. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Nazim. All right, so let's look at some key facts about Australia. Australia is one of the largest island country and is surrounded by the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. It has 6 states and 2 mainland territories. The capital city of Australia is Canberra. And the biggest cities are Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Brisbane, and Adelaide. The population of Australia is about 26 million. And Australia has a very multicultural and diverse population. So you will find many languages, cultures, food, customs in Australia. You will also find a wide variety of wildlife here, of which many are only found in Australia, such as the kangaroos. The national language spoken in Australia is English, and the currency used in Australia is the Australian dollars. Now I'll go to the next slide.
So just a few facts about New Zealand. So New Zealand has 3 islands. There's North Island, the South Island, and there's a little island down the bottom, which is called Stewart Island. The capital of New Zealand is Wellington. New Zealand has 2 languages. One is English and the other is Maori. Maori is the national, or the, I guess, the language of the indigenous population. And New Zealand has their own currency, the New Zealand dollar. They tend to opt for the metric system, so kilometers, meters, centimeters, similar to Australia, as opposed to the imperial system. The national bird of New Zealand is the kiwi, as in not kiwi the fruit, but kiwi as in the actual bird kiwi. It is a flightless bird, and it's their national bird. New Zealand is quite well known for having a lot of sheep. They have more sheep than human population, and often get teased for that. New Zealand is very well known for being a very scenic and beautiful country, and you'll see that by the 2 images on the right-hand side. If you intend on traveling and, you know, seeing some beautiful landscapes, as opposed to going to somewhere like Switzerland where it's quite cold, you may end up going to New Zealand, which will sort of cover you in that sense of seeing somewhere like, which is very beautiful and scenic. New Zealand loves their sports, as does Australia as well. Despite having such a small population, they will compete in every and any single sport that they can. And this was sort of seen in the Olympics, where they sort of participated in any and pretty much every single sport that they could. But the main sports are rugby union, cricket, rugby league, and hockey as well. You'll see up at the top of the screen, they've got some New Zealand players, rugby union players, who are just about to perform the Haka. So the Haka is like a traditional dance that's performed by the entire New Zealand team just before a rugby match. And it's meant to entice fear in the opponent. And it's been a long-standing tradition, something that they continue to do, and I'm sure will continue to do for ongoing generations. Yeah, next slide, please.
Okay. So let's have a look at the Australian education system. So the Australian education system follows the Australian Qualification Framework, which is also known as the AQF. So what AQF is, it is actually a policy for regulated qualifications in the Australian education and training system, and your degree is nationally accredited. There are a total of 10 levels in the AQF, as you can see on the picture on the right, with level 10 being the highest level of education. So when you go to college and you get, let's say, a certificate 1, that is actually your level 1 in the AQF. Then all the way up to level 5, you get level 5 when you get a diploma from an Australian college. Advanced diploma or an associate degree would be level 6. And when you do your 3 years of undergraduate degree, you have achieved level 7. Now, the next level up, you achieve level 8 when you've done the 4th year of your undergraduate degree, which is your honors, or a graduate certificate or a graduate diploma. Then next up, level 9 is when you do a master's degree, which is generally 1 to 2 years of study. And the last one, the highest one, level 10, is when you do a PhD, which is generally about 3 years. Okay, so let's have a look at the tertiary education in Australia next. So the Australian education system is broadly divided into universities and vocational institutions. So there are 42 universities in total in Australia. Some Australian universities are among the top 100 international universities globally. And these universities offer undergraduate programs, postgraduate, masters, and PhD. And the Australian education system is very much structured like the British system. And the vocational institutions in particular are very closely linked with the industries and are practical and skill-based. So from a college, you can get certificate 1 to 4, diploma, advanced diploma. So all of that you can get from a vocational institution or a college. So in Australia, there are a total of 2 intakes. The first one is February, March, which has an application deadline of October, November in the year prior to that. And the second intake is actually July, August, and the deadline for the application is generally between April and May. Now, just on the side, I wanted to mention about some of the Australian inventions. Wi-Fi that we use in our everyday life, so in our phones, in our laptops, that's actually an Australian invention. Others like the black box flight recorder, the cochlear hearing implants, the ultrasound scanner, and many more were actually invented by Australians. Okay. Now let's do an overview of the universities in Australia. So the largest university in Australia is the Monash University, with about 75,000 students, and it has 5 local campuses and 5 international campuses. So the second largest one after that is RMIT, and followed by that is the University of Sydney. Now, many of these universities are divided into specific groups. The group of 8 refers to the flagship and the highly ranked universities, and there are a total of 8, hence the group of 8. Technology-related universities are grouped under the group of technology network. Then there is a group of innovative research, and then there's a group of regional universities as they are in regional areas. And just a few pictures of different universities in Australia on the right of this slide. Okay. Now on this slide, so this is a map of Australia, right? And on the right-hand side, all the universities are listed by state and territory. So if you look on the map on the left, and starting from the left side of the map is Western Australia. And the major city here is Perth. To the right in orange color is South Australia. And the major city here is Adelaide. Above that is the Northern Territory. And this area has, well, it has mostly deserts, right? But there's a small city called Darwin over here. Now, to the right in purple color is Queensland, and the major city here is Brisbane. And right under that is New South Wales, with the major city being Sydney. And if you see, there's a small territory right under here, and that's actually called the Australian Capital Territory. And this is where the capital city of Australia is, which is Canberra. Now, under New South Wales is Victoria, and the major city here is Melbourne. So, I hope that This map gives a visual image into the different areas in Australia. Okay, so now let's have a look at some of the student statistics. These statistics are actually from the previous years, but it provides a good indication to what are the areas of studies international students went for or opted for. So in 2019, a total of 450,000 students were enrolled in universities, of which 170,000 were international students. The average intake of international students per university per year was between 1,000, which would be for more of a regional university, to about 12,000 for a more major university. Now, on the top right side of the slide, you see there are two pie charts. The one on the right provides an indication of what field of study the international students went for. So the green color in that chart, being the larger portion of that chart, shows the majority of international students went for management and commerce course. Fields like IT in purple, engineering in orange, health in maroon are in similar portions. Now the pie chart right below shows the distribution of international students by state and territory. Majority of students studied in New South Wales, that was about 38%, then Victoria about 32%, and followed by Queensland, which was about 15%, and the remaining were in the other areas. So at least this shows distribution of the international students in Australia.
So in New Zealand, the qualification framework is called the New Zealand Qualification Framework, and it's essentially the same as what Australia has. It's synonymous to that. It's also government authorized and nationally accredited. Similar to Australia, it has 10 levels, with levels 1 to 4 comprising of your certificates, levels 5 and 6, your certificates and diplomas. Level 7 is where you start your bachelor's degree, your graduate certificates and graduate diplomas. Level 8 is your postgraduate certificates, postgraduate diplomas, and your honors degree. And then level 9, your master's, and 10 being the highest, your doctoral degree. So New Zealand consists of or comprises of 8 universities and 18 institutes of technology and polytechniques, or ITPs. So the universities, they offer your undergraduate and postgraduate courses, as well as the ITPs. They also offer undergraduate and postgraduate degrees, but they also offer all your certificates and diplomas and graduate certificates and graduate diplomas, which are essentially all the courses that focus on practical skills and hands-on experience. The intake periods are exactly the same as Australia. For universities, whether it's undergrad or postgrad, it's February and July. And the vocational courses and institutes/colleges are February and July, but they sometimes also allow intakes around March, April, and May. And the cutoff periods are exactly identical to what we have for Australia as well. Next slide, please. So just on the right-hand side, you'll see the distribution of all the 8 universities that New Zealand has, just for your reference. In terms of student statistics for 2018, just over 170,000 students were enrolled in university, of which 16% were international students. The average intake of international students per year is between 80 to 120,000 across all universities and vocational institutions. The most popular fields, similar to Australia, are management and commerce and engineering for 2019. And the majority of students or international students are based in Auckland, New Zealand, as opposed to Wellington, which I said is the capital of New Zealand. And Auckland is also where we have our Jamaat Khana as well in New Zealand. Next slide, please. So when it comes to preparing for your studies in Australia and New Zealand, so ANZ, or even in general, we sort of said that there are 3 steps that you would need to sort of take as you go through the preparation phase. And we said that the first step was, selecting an appropriate course to study at and an institution or city. Now you may choose a particular course and then decide on an institution or city, or you may go the other way around, deciding that you want to live at a particular city and then study at this particular institution and then go for this particular course. And then the next step logically would be then, okay, once I've decided all this, is how much is it going to cost me to either study and live within that particular city, whether it's Australia or New Zealand. And then your final step is then, of course, applying for your course and your visa as well. Next slide, please. So selecting, this is a question that we quite often get, and it's about selecting a course and, how do you choose the right institution once you know what you want to study? So we've just jotted down some points as to what we think would sort of guide you, assist you in making a decision. So one might be the location of the institution, knowing how long will it take you to commute to where you are. Where are you going to have to take public transport? You're going to have to buy a car, so on and so forth. And then you may also be thinking about, how close is Jamaat Khana, or how close is the Ismaili community? We don't have many Jamaat Khanas in Australia and New Zealand. We only have one in each major city. So we have one in Sydney, 2 in Melbourne, 1 in Brisbane, 1 in Adelaide, 1 in Perth, and just the 1 in New Zealand, which I said was in Auckland. Some other things that you may want to consider are the quality of the institution. So I think it's very important to look at not just the ranking of the university, but also the ranking of the faculty as well. And on a previous slide that Shehzad had showed, which had the distribution of the Australian universities on the map, there was a link down the bottom which had the QS rankings. So that's pretty much the gold standard as to where you can potentially look for how universities are ranked against each other by faculty, by course, and so on and so forth. Some other things that you might want to consider are the length of the course. So in some instances, you can do a bachelor's degree, which can be done in 3 years, and in others, it can be done in a little longer. It could be a 4-year degree. So if I were to take engineering as an example, you can, in some universities, you must do an honors year, and so engineering is 4 years. Whereas in other instances, engineering is only 3 years, and the honors year is sort of an extra or an add-on year to that. So just some things to be mindful of as well as you're doing your research. Of course, as I mentioned before, factoring in how much it's going to cost to study at that particular institution and the living costs as well. A lot of this information will be covered to give you in the next webinar. We'll give you some high-level figures as to what the cost of studying and we'll cover the cost of studying in this webinar, but the cost of living will be covered in more detail in the next webinar. Some other things to consider are scholarship or funding opportunities that may be on offer at that particular institution. What are the available support or resources that that institution is offering? So for example, you might want to look at a particular institution that has a good focus on like career advisement or mentoring, or they may have better mental health resources or simple things such as facilities, such as a gym. And then the last thing which we thought was important was the skilled occupation list or the migration list, which is for those people who are looking to obtain their permanent residency within Australia or New Zealand. Going through that list to identify what some of the in-demand, I guess, jobs or career paths or education pathways are to obtain your permanent residency. Again, this will be covered more in detail in the second webinar. And one thing I will say is that you have to make sure that you're constantly looking at that occupation list because it does change from time to time. Next slide, please. So some other things that, you may want to consider when deciding to travel overseas and to study is that, this one's pretty obvious, but make sure that you start exploring your options early. If you're looking to do your bachelor's degree overseas, it's really important to start from a younger age when you're in year 9 and 10. Then like knowing that you want to go overseas and knowing that you want to go to a particular country, it's very important to sort of jot down the courses that you want to study and the institutions that will offer that particular course. The other thing is to attend education fairs. Right now, because we're all in lockdown and COVID is out and about, all the education fairs, all the open days are virtual. They're all online. So, by all means, take advantage of the current situation and try and watch these open days from the comfort of your home. The last thing I would say is, talk to the experts, talk to career counselors who know the trajectory of what career pathways will sort of take in certain fields, or what you're best suited to in terms of your strengths, your skills as to what career path you could potentially take. Next slide, please.
Okay, so now let's have a look at the cost of studying in Australia. First of all, you must have enough money to pay for 1 full year of tuition fee and 1 year of living expenses. So when you apply to universities, you have to prove and you have to provide evidence that you have the funds. That's one of the key requirements. As a general guide into the cost of education, the cost that you see here in this slide is the cost per annum. So it's per year cost. And it's a general guide which was taken from October 2019. So the cost of schooling was between 7,800 to 30,000. So it's quite a big spread. Then if you wanted to study an English language course, it was roughly around $300 per week, and it would depend on the length of the course that is required. Then if you went to a vocational education or a training center or institute, so that's between 4,000 and 22,000. If you do your undergraduate bachelor's degree, that can cost anywhere between $20,000 to $45,000. If you do a postgraduate master's degree, that is between $22,000 to $50,000. And if you do a PhD, so that's $18,000 to $42,000. And again, this is a very, very general guide, and it really depends on the course that you select.
So in terms of New Zealand, the reason why Shehzad and I are sharing with you the cost of schooling, like primary and high school and secondary, is because you may be a family who might be coming to Australia and New Zealand looking to do a high degree by research, a postgraduate coursework degree, a postgraduate research degree, and you may be coming here as a family with kids. So we thought that it would be important to share this information with you as well, just for your reference. So all these currencies in the previous slide were in Australian dollars, and all the currencies in the current slide are in New Zealand dollars. As I see a question that's come up through the chat. So for primary school in New Zealand, years 1 to 8, it's $11,000 per year, and that's New Zealand dollars. Secondary, which is considered to be years 9 to 13, is about $13,000 per year. And then private schools, they will jump up in price significantly. Anywhere from $25,000 to something that is $25,000 and above, and let's just leave it at that. When it comes to English language classes, as Shehzad had sort of said, the cost can vary depending on the length of the course and the accreditation and so on and so forth. But it's generally about 350 New Zealand dollars per week. And for example, a Cambridge English exam course can cost about $5,100 for a period of 12 weeks. One sort of feedback that we have received from international students that have come to Australia and New Zealand have sort of dived into this and paid for it, what they've found is that they've been told that these English courses will make them fluent and coherent in the entire English language, and that is not the case. These courses are very much beginner or basic sort of introduction to English, so just be mindful before you invest significant amounts of money into these sort of courses as well. So when it comes to the, I guess, when you're looking at vocational and undergraduate and postgraduate degrees, the costs will, I guess, gradually go up. And when you look at the New Zealand Qualification Framework, naturally, except for a doctorate degree, a PhD. So when you're looking at a vocational education training, a one-term certificate in computing is approximately 12,500 New Zealand dollars. A 2-year diploma in engineering is about $18,500 per year. A bachelor's degree, 22 to 35,000. A postgraduate master's degree, 26 to 37,000 per year. And your PhD, your doctorate degree, 6,500 to 9,000 per year. Now, the reason for PhDs to be cheaper than your undergraduate and postgraduate degrees is that Australia and New Zealand are quite keen to undertake research. You would have heard that Shehzad had said on an earlier slide that Australians had developed all these innovative technologies, inventions, and this would not have been possible without potentially undertaking a PhD. A PhD is a good base or a foundation to sort of undertake research and find new inventions or new ways to sort of treat things, and that's why they are cheaper. Next slide, please. So I know this is sort of a hot topic in terms of scholarships, and I did mention this before. When looking for a particular institution, it is good to see what scholarship opportunities are available. What I will say is that if you're coming to Australia or New Zealand, there are very limited number of opportunities that do exist when it comes to undergraduate students and postgraduate coursework. And at the same time, they are extremely competitive. When it comes to postgraduate research, on the other hand, there are plenty of opportunities available. So if you're looking to do a PhD, many opportunities do exist to obtain a scholarship. We have listed out like a list of potential scholarships that you can have a look at. By all means, take a screenshot if you like. I believe Education Board India will also be able to share this with you down the track. In addition to these sites, we also encourage you to look at the tertiary institution that you're looking to apply to. Quite often what happens is that students will look at all the other websites and not look at the institution that they're looking to apply to and miss out on potential scholarships that they could be eligible for. So just some things to be mindful of. Next slide, please.
Okay, so let's have a look at some of the internships and the student exchange programs. So internships are very important as they provide valuable experience in obtaining industry insights, right? So they help to develop the skills gained from practical experience, and most of all, it helps you to start building your professional network of contacts. It will help you so you can put this as an experience in your resume or your CV, which will also help you in getting future employment. So it's very important. Generally, international students holding a student visa are allowed to do internships, so there's no problem there. And here are some websites that we provided as an example where you can find these internship opportunities. So please have a look at these websites, see what's out there. It will give you a good idea on that. Now, the exchange programs, on the other hand, it might be an attractive option to some people, as it gives an opportunity for you to study a semester or two in another university, in another state, or another country. So what happens here is that many universities have partnership agreements with other universities across the globe. and they will allow you to swap places with another student from another university. But you have to check the requirements from the home institution. And what is the home institution? So the home institution is where you are or you will be enrolled in your course. You have to check with them on other things like if they have a formal exchange agreement with other universities. Would you have to pay any additional cost, or would normal tuition fee that you're currently paying in that university would apply? So you have to check things like that. The other thing that you would want to check is, would you get credit for your study from studying in another university? So there are some things that you do have to check with regards to this particular program. Okay, so let's have a look at the tertiary institution admission requirements. So here are some general admission requirements for universities in Australia. English, number 1. So you will need to do an English language test and check with your university which test or which particular test is acceptable. So for example, there's an option of IELTS, TOEFL. There's also a test called Pearson test of English. There might be others, so you have to check on that. Now, the next is health insurance. So in Australia, health insurance is a must, and you must have this before you arrive to Australia. So you can either take out private health insurance, or there is something called the OSHC, which full form is Overseas Student Health Cover. So I think that's a bit more subsidized for the students. So you can check on that as well. Now, the third requirement, as I mentioned before, that you would need to show evidence that you have enough money to pay for your living and your tuition fee for the full year. Okay, let's have a look at more requirements. So academic requirements. So you have to check with the university what academic requirements are accepted by your university. So we've listed a few of them. There may be more. Then there's another requirement for a genuine temporary entrant requirement. So what this is that you have to write a personal statement. It is also known as the SOP, which is the statement of purpose. So what it is you have to write about why you want to come to Australia or New Zealand, how getting an education in Australia or New Zealand benefits your career, what are your future prospects. So you're trying to sell yourself to the university. Now for postgraduates, the requirements are similar to undergraduate, but there may be additional requirements like you have to show your professional experience in the form of a resume or a CV. You might have to write a personal statement. There might be an interview that you have to do, or you might even have to write a research proposal, and you have to secure a supervisor before you actually get an admission. So these are some of the additional requirements. Okay, next, let's have a look at the application process. So in this slide, we've put together a very generic application process, but you have to check with each university on their specific process. But in general, this covers it. So the first step is you choose a course, what you'll study. So you find out what you'll study, what are the requirements and the application submission deadlines. Then you check then the next step, once you've chosen a course, then the next step is you check your eligibility. So things like English language requirements, academic requirements, are there any other requirements, right? So all of these will be listed on that particular university under that course. coursework application. Then you start gathering all your documents like your English language test results, your academic transcripts, any documents related to your student visa that you have to apply in future. Your passport, of course, you need that, and any other documents that might be required. So once you've gathered your documents, then you check your finances, tuition fees, living expenses, application submission. There would be an application submission fee, the visa cost, the health insurance, so things like that. Now, once you've done all that preliminary work, you've got your documents, you've got everything ready, then now you're ready to apply. So then what you do is you submit your application online on each university's web portal. So it's an online application form, you can fill it out online. And then once you fill that up, then you can upload all your documents that you've gathered onto your application on that same portal. So once you submit, you pay the application processing fee, then the university will keep you informed of all the application progress via email. And of course, once you're successful, big congratulations, you will receive your offer letter, and then you can accept it online and pay your semester fee, your health insurance, and then you can start applying for your student visa. So this is a very generic application process. Now, on the next slide is postgraduate application process. So now the process for the postgraduate is very similar to undergraduate, but there may be additional requirements, like you need to do a research proposal, you might have to secure a supervisor, then you might have to refine your research proposal with your supervisor. So there would be different additional requirements for the course that you're choosing on top of the undergraduate requirements that we covered in the previous slide. So once you've gathered all the documents, you're aligned with all your requirements, you then go and submit your application online. It's just the same way as I mentioned for the undergraduate process, using the web portal. And then once you're successful, you pay the fees, you apply for your student visa. So it's very similar in that regard.
So earlier on, when I spoke about the 3 different webinars that we're delivering, the third webinar, which is a Career Horizons panel discussion. So Career Horizons Explore Your Career Choices is a brand that we've sort of developed for the Australian and New Zealand Jamaat, and it's all about guiding and assisting, whether it's students or parents or people looking for a career change, to assist them with their career and matching them up with a mentor. So we have a guidance and mentoring program, and it essentially does what it says down the bottom. It aims to find a mentor to help give you clarity and direction to guide you with your decisions. And we're extending this out to the Jamaat of India as well, for those international students who are looking to potentially come to Australia and New Zealand. We're more than happy to try and connect you with Ismailis who are in a particular field that you are interested in studying or looking into. And I suggest, I think in the beginning we had a slide set up that, the point of contact is your education board for India, who will then get in touch with us and connect us with them. And so that we can then match you up with the appropriate Jamaati member here. Next slide, please. So in addition to Shahzad and myself, we've got a special guest with us, Sonu Meghani, who has kindly agreed to sort of share his experience. He's a current international student taking on two different courses at the same time. He's located in Melbourne, Australia. And before I say any more, I'll hand it over to Sonu just so he can share his experience while studying here in Australia. Over to you.
Hi everyone, Yarimut. Am I audible?
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to share my views. just want to say that it's been a roller coaster ride for me after I came here, and just want to say everybody who wants to come to Australia and New Zealand to study over here that don't lay any stereotypical image for this country or any other countries you want to go out. Just be ready and be adaptable enough, because you will meet some new challenges over here. Of course, you will learn something new, and always be like that. So how was I feeling before I come to Australia? I came to Australia. It was like I've just passed out my 12th and was just looking for a good option I can. And I've never thought that I'll go outside India and start studying over there. And then with group of friends, we're just discussing about what to do next and how to just shape your life up. How to do what's next now? Now we completed our 12th and we need to do something. Yeah, we were like, no, we have to do something big. We want to start our own business. We want to go for startups. We're going to go for these jobs. And I chose that I should go outside the country to explore more. Yeah, so I chose Australia for that, because many of my friends were here, and they were good enough. They are doing good over here. I don't know about, like, it's different from person to person how you grasp things when you go outside. So I was feeling a bit nervous because the education system, the people, the working pattern of the people is different over here, and you need to need to learn that, need to observe that every day when you go out here. And yes, I completed my 12th in commerce, so of course I need to go into a field something related to business and banking and all that. So I chose for accounting. Yes, Nazim sir just told about skilled occupation list. So I just want to clear that before, accounting was in skilled occupation list, but when I applied for that, it was nearly impossible to get the permanent residency over here in accounting. But I was like, I don't have to change my mind. I don't have to change my career. And I just chose accounting and came over here. Of course, because of this COVID thing going on right now, they have again included the accounting in skilled occupational list. But with that, okay, so before COVID, 1 year, it was normal in Australia. And now I was starting looking like I love this place. It's like, it's good place to work, and it's like the lifestyle is different from India, but it's good. Yeah. So now I want to apply for my permanent residency. For permanent residency, what I think is that you start exploring at the very early stage when you come over here. After 6 months, 7 months, you will come to know, because you will meet people over here. Try to meet more and more people. Try to communicate with more and more people, and develop a good habit of asking questions if you don't understand anything. Okay. So I was new over here, and I got a job in accounting in a firm, and I started working over there. There are some things different, and that habit of asking questions, it helps a lot to you. So yes, it was challenging for me, but I did it somehow, and I'm going to complete my course in just now. This is my last semester going on over here. I'll be graduating in October, and yes, I'm doing building and construction also certificate. So like, Australia and New Zealand is a country where trade courses are highly in demand. But the catch is that you won't get visa approvals more often on these courses. So mostly, like, what I observe is that people over here come in a professional course like accounting, IT, and then switch over to trade courses. It acts as a backup when you want to apply for permanent residency. Sometimes this trade courses helps you to get permanent residency easily if you want to move to regional areas or other parts of the country other than Victoria. Yes. Challenges when you start studying over here. Difficult to manage time. Of course, you have to learn it. Of course, you have to start working over here. You are allowed to work 20 hours a week. So you will get a job in 3 or 4 months on an average. And once you get the job, you have to manage your job, manage your assignments, attend the classes, and all this management. It will be difficult for you in the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but later you will understand how to manage your time. Yeah. And then while doing assignments as well, here Australia is very strict with assignments and studying, because they don't like, we can't just go on the internet and copy everything and just submit the assignment. uh, it's considered illegal, and they can take no serious actions on you if you're caught doing that. References, all this will be very useful for you when you come over here. You will learn these things. I have also made same mistakes. No, never referred anyone in the answers and just caught up in that. So it will be difficult, but you will learn it by the time. What support I got from my university is that when we entered into this COVID era, and universities, like they felt that international students are left alone, so we were not getting any help from the government, of course. And at the start, I can say, the colleges, the universities, what my university is Charleston University, so it's basically based in regional area. It's in Wagga Wagga. So but they have the campuses in Melbourne as well, so they have like city campuses as well, so you can study over there. You don't have to go to Wagga Wagga for that in regional area. So no, they help you. They give you additional discounts and scholarships, and to maintain, like they give you some rights. They give you some help in assignments as well when you face difficulty in COVID times. Of course, we are going online right now, so they also provide some more time to complete your assignments, because they know that it's a problem for us. The last thing I'll conclude with this, and the last tip and tricks. I can say you that what I said in the start. Don't maintain a stereotype in the mind, like I'm only going to do this. Things will change. Skilled occupational list will change. Some things will change what you have not planned for it, but be ready for it. And if you have that, you have to achieve something. Yes, you can, if you want to. And just thanks for that. Thanks, Nazim sir, for letting me speak and share my experience. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Saul, for joining us and sharing your experience. I think it was really important. Like a lot of things that you said, I think very handful and very handy tips that you sort of given out to prospective students. The most, I think, important thing that I felt that you said was that to be adaptable. I think you've got to be that willingness to come in with an open mind and being able to sort of adapt and change and sort of settle into the culture and sort of society in whether it's Australia or whether it's New Zealand. So look, thanks once again. Thanks for taking out the time and sharing that with us.
Thank you.
So we're nearing essentially the end of the presentation. So as you know, we've just gone through the Australian and New Zealand tertiary landscape. As I said earlier on, the next webinar that we're looking to cover is all about living and settling in Australia and New Zealand. So looking at the living costs, looking at the adjusting to life in Australia and New Zealand, looking at things that you should be aware of just before migrating here, things like the skilled occupation list that we've sort of touched on, and so on and so forth. And then the third webinar will be a Career Horizons panel discussion where we'll get Jamaati members who had come to Australia and New Zealand as an international student and have now established themselves just to share their experience in their particular field, just that you get some assurance that, irrespective of what happens, there are some struggles that, even Sona had just mentioned, but you do overcome them and there is support available. So yeah, that's essentially what's in the pipeline. You can go to the next slide, please. So that's it from Shahzad and myself. Thank you very much for giving once again the opportunity to sort of deliver this webinar to the Jamaat in India. One thing, as I said at the beginning, is that we have created these very detailed guides, a welcome to Australia and welcome to New Zealand, a guide for international students, and these guides will be made available in due course. So please stay tuned, and we look to now, I guess, go to Q&A and answer any questions that you have.
Awesome. So first of all, thanks a lot, Nazim sir and Shehzad sir and even Sonu for this presentation. I think it had a lot of details, well researched and well founded in data. It was not something which was open ended for people to take a call. It was something that you can clearly see what people are choosing, where international students are going, colleges and so on. So thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of research would have gone in from your end and from the board to come up with such a presentation. So thanks a lot. And with Sonu coming on board and giving an example of what it is for a student to live in Australia, it was like an icing on the cake for us. So thanks a lot. One learning that clearly I can take away from Sonu's conversation is that he is doing two studies parallelly. So looks like life is not as straightforward as it looks. People might think studying abroad is choosing a course and just landing up there, but looks like there is a lot of research and a lot of conviction that one needs to build before going in. So thanks a lot for that as well. With that, so we'll open up for Q&A. We have a lot of queries in the Q&A window. So what I'll do is I'll probably club the questions here. The first query that I would want to club is around scholarships. So there are a couple of queries on that. Let me just read those out to you. So one was, can we get scholarships in Australian universities post-graduation? Seems like a general query, but that's one of the queries. The other one on scholarship was, can an individual get more than one scholarship for different categories? So one could be for merit, another could be for need basis or early acceptance and so on. So are there multiple scholarships that people can look out for? And the third is on the eligibility criteria as to for scholarships in Australia and New Zealand. On what basis do they decide a scholarship has to be given? And is there a scope of 100% scholarship? I'm sure that will be amazing if it happens, but that's also a question been asked. So that's on the scholarship aspect.
Okay, so I'll try to answer. I'll try my best to answer those questions. So yes, the very first question, yes, there are opportunities available in the postgraduate space. As I said, there's many opportunities that are available for PhD students. If you're looking to do postgraduate coursework, there are limited opportunities, as with same goes with undergraduate studies as well. The second question, which was around can you have more than one scholarship at the same time? Look, this comes down to the individual scholarship requirements. You've got to be very careful as you read through them, because sometimes someone will say that you can only have this particular scholarship and that's it. You can't apply for anything else. In some instances, there's no requirements, there's no minimum. You can have multiple scholarships. So it just depends on the area or the field that you're applying to. It depends on the scholarship itself. It depends on the institution. There's multiple factors that come into play. So I can't give you a yes or no answer. And all I can say right now is yes for some, no for others. It really depends. The third question, which was can the scholarship, sorry?
The criteria for eligibility.
Criteria for eligibility. So again, it does vary for the type of scholarship that you're looking to apply for. If you're some will say that you've got to have certain grades. Some will say that if you're looking for a PhD, you might have had to have published in the past in a scientific journal. Some will say that you've got to show that you are participating in extracurricular activities, that you're a well-rounded individual. Some will say that if you're looking for a sporting scholarship, you must show that you have represented the country or state in some sort of level. So again, it is a very broad question. It becomes very difficult to answer because it comes down to the field that you're looking to apply to. And I believe there was one last question on scholarships, which was on
the $1 million question. Is there 100% scholarship?
100% scholarships. Again, I haven't come across one that is 100% that will cover, your fees and cost of living and studying. I haven't come across one to date. I haven't come across one that covers your entire fees either. There's always going to be a small amount hidden hidden costs that you might not realize where you'll have to pay out of pocket. But there are scholarships which do cover a significant amount as well. It is, again, a very difficult question to answer because it will come down to the field or area that you're sort of going into or looking into. I hope that answers those 4 questions that were there to some extent.
Right. So Nazim, so just to summarize on this, so if let's say somebody who's just looking at scholarship, what are the resources that they should be looking at? One is the college website, where they would have information on scholarship. What are the other sources that they could look at to at least get an answer to this question?
Yeah, I think if we can go back to, if Shehzad, if you want to go back to that particular slide, we've got some other links there as well. So if that person would like to take a screenshot of that, by all means they can. They're your list of other areas or other sort of different scholarships to look into if you're interested, besides the college or the institution that you're looking to apply to. So that should be a good starting point.
Awesome. I think that that takes care of scholarship as a segment that we wanted to answer. Moving on, the next part is on more on summer programs for students while they're in school. It could be to do a project or environmental studies and so on, maybe just to get an experience what it is to work in a foreign country or to work on a project. The specific query looks like is for a student who's in the school, and this is a parent, I'm assuming, who's asking this query. So that's one query, and there was one more related one. Maybe you can answer this, and meanwhile I can bring that up.
Yeah. So if you're a high school student, generally you do get work experience when you're in year 10. So 2 years before finishing high school, or in New Zealand, I believe it's in year 11. And you get to, depending on the school that you go to, I think it's a period of 2 weeks. I think you put down your preferences to say that, I want to work in this sort of space or in this particular environment, in this particular field, and the school will then allocate you and give you the opportunity to work in that industry. So those opportunities definitely do exist for high school students.
Right. And how does one access it, Nazim sir, if somebody wants to?
So the school will like let you know. So it's something that is actually, I believe, is compulsory for all students to do as part of their schooling life. It's to give them the real world experience as to what the real world is like when you're working full time.
Right. And can people from India, if let's say somebody, I'm in the 9th grade, I'm in India right now, and I want to try that out in any of the schools. So is that transfer possible?
Yeah, so I mean, if it's obligatory by that school, then the student must do it. Then there must be like rare sort of circumstances where you wouldn't be allowed to participate in something like that. So yeah.
Got it. Sure. So moving on, there are a lot of queries on PR and requirements. So I'll probably club it together. So the first query that we have on this lines is, are the university fees lower for those who hold a PR? Looks like this is coming from a working professional. And would you suggest working professionals to take a PR route and then enroll in a university for cost savings, or what would your suggestions be? Looks like a very somebody who's been planning for it for some time. So over to you.
I'll give it a shot, and then Shehzad, feel free to add in as well. The first part of the question is, is it cheaper to undertake a course if you have your permanent residency, if you have your citizenship? Yes, it is. Domestic students by default are always paying less than what international students will pay. Is it better to get your permanent residency and then go for a particular course, a particular degree? I mean, I think it depends on your personal circumstances, because I mean, if you're married and have kids, it will cut, like, all that will come into play, because the older you are, the more difficult it will be to sort of allocate time to something like that. And it's a very personal question. So if you're willing to wait and get your permanent residency and then, look to sort of apply and apply for a particular course, then it'll drag on, of course. I think it's more of a preference thing. If you're happy to pay the higher fees and then go for that, and then eventually get your permanent residency and go down that route, that's like, I mean, they're both equally options. Like equal options. It just comes down to your preference and your situation. Shehzad, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's right what you said. And, you have to also factor in the time, the extra time that it will take to get to the end goal. And there will still be cost associated with getting the permanent residency. And if you have to come and study, so you have to pay fees for that, which won't be cheap anyway. So, you have to add all of that up. Is it still viable? It's a personal choice.
Got it. Got it. Great. So the next question on PR is: this is a student who wants to come after +2. Looks like what Sonu did. So he did his 12th and then he migrated. So looks like a similar case. And so the person would not have any work experience. Okay, and because of that, the PR points would be somehow less. So what's the pathway according to you for PR if one has to come for bachelor's in city and not in regional areas?
So I think, as I said at the beginning, Shehzad and I, we're not migration agents or consultants. So I don't feel like we are the right people to answer this particular question. I mean, Shehzad, if you have further thoughts, but I think some of this stuff will be covered in the second webinar. But even then, when Anish does discuss this, I think he will not be comfortable in sort of responding to a very direct or specific question like this. I think, look, if you do have a particular query, I think reach out directly to the Education Board for India, and then they can get in touch with us, and then we can try and connect you with a professional in the field, and then like a migration agent or migration consultant who sort of knows more about what to do, what not to do, how to best approach it, and then take it from there. Like that would be my advice at this particular stage. Unless Shehzad, if you've got any further comments to add to that.
Yeah, so that's right. I mean, we are not migration agents, and the situation is always changing year on year. But what I've seen in the past is that, let's say if you have overseas work experience, and compared to working locally in Australia, if you do, let's say 1 year, you get, for example, 5 points, right? But you would get 5 points if you work 5 years or 10 years overseas to get the same amount of points. So there are things like that. And then other things are like, if you are a translator of language. And so there are a few things that can help to boost your points score. But I mean, we can't give a specific answer. It's very general.
Got it. Got it. It looks like it answers a few other queries also that was on can you help us migrate? I think a clear answer is no. We're just here to help and facilitate on the information part, but I think a lot of groundwork will have to be done by the students. So I think that's crystal clear. Now, moving on, there are a few queries on the pandemic situation, visa and admission process. New Zealand has closed its borders for the end of the year. So if you could shed some light on how pandemic is affecting international students coming to New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah, I think Australia and New Zealand have been very strict in who they allow and who they don't allow to the country, and that is international students. And I think even many of our local people are sort of are stuck overseas and have not been allowed to come back. Whereas some other countries have been a lot more relaxed as to allowing international students to come in. Now, I think because of the fluidity of the situation where things are changing so dramatically, it is very hard to comment and give you a definitive response as to when borders will open and what's going to happen next. We're currently in Sydney and New South Wales. We're in a lockdown. New Zealand's in a lockdown. Most of Australia is going in and out of lockdown. I think with the hope of reducing the number of cases to then potentially open borders next year. I mean, universities are struggling, whether it's Australia, whether it's university, they are relying on international students to sort of continue with paying their wages and paying their employees, because that's where the money is. As we said that, international students pay a lot more than what domestic students do pay. It is very hard to give a definitive answer as to when borders will open and how and what will be happening next. And I would just suggest that the best advice that I can give to you is, I would just say, watch the news, be attentive as to what's happening, stay tuned, because I think the more, and look at reliable resources. Don't be checking your WhatsApp messages. Look at the news, listen to what's going on, to make sure that you're on top of things, so that when things do change, you can then take full advantage of that change and then look to apply at that particular point in time. That would be my advice or my suggestions. Shehzad, anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that you've covered it. It's nobody knows right now.
So next we have a few more queries on PhD requirements. I think Nazim, so you'd be best suited given that you're doing one right now. So one was on the PhD requirements and which country is best for research, for culture and tourism. I don't exactly get that, but okay, maybe if it on a general level, the PhD requirements, assuming that they want to do research in culture and tourism, interesting. And there was one more query on PhD was, are there any specific criteria for pursuing PhD in New Zealand? There's one more query, but I'll just pause on for you to answer this and I can.
So I think, Shehzad, if you want to go to the slide which goes to the admission requirements for a PhD, I think they essentially cover what is required. I mean, in terms of eligibility, making sure that you've got your English is ticked, is under the way. You've got your bachelor's degree and an honours year or a master's, or sometimes they will accept the equivalent research experience, and then with the possibility of having professional experience as well, having a CV and having, I guess, having a research proposal put together, having a supervisor in mind, or knowing what area that you want to go into. I think all these things will sort of come into play. Sometimes there are requirements in terms of having a number of publications that you must have had. It really depends, because it will come down to the faculty and the field that you're looking to apply to in terms of requirements. I don't know that we can sort of tell you specifically as to what area, because myself being in medicine and health, I can potentially tell you about that. But if you were to talk about, say, engineering, or if you were to say something about politics or law and doing a PhD in that area, it would be very different again. I think I would encourage you to maybe, if you have a very specific question, again, send the email, reach out to the Education Board for India, who will then get in touch with us, and then we can sort of try and guide you with very specific information. Does that sort of answer that query, or?
We have a few more specific queries as well. So criteria, like you mentioned, looks like it's broad and would be dependent. And I think the best source to find this would be the university's website where you want to do your
That's
PhD.
right. That's right.
So that makes sense. Is there an age criteria for pursuing PhD in New Zealand? I think this is a case where the person has taken a sabbatical break and couldn't study further after the postgrad in biochemistry. So very specific, but she wants to understand if there's an age criteria for pursuing PhD in New Zealand.
Not that I'm aware of. There's no minimum or maximum age. I know of, I mean, from an Australian perspective, I know we've got an Ismaili Jamati member who is 70 plus and is pursuing his PhD. So there's no minimum age. I believe I was in touch with someone in New Zealand who was in his 40s who was doing his PhD at the time. So there's no minimum age in that sense.
Got it. And can you take a PhD right after your graduation, or do you have to do masters and then take up? I think there's one query on that as well, which is related to it.
So when you say graduation, I mean just your bachelor's degree plus
The
honors?
bachelor's. The
Okay.
bachelor's degree, just the
Just the
bachelor's.
bachelor's degree. So generally, no, because you've got to show that you've either done an honors year. So you've got to show that you've done some sort of research beforehand. And an honors year is your 1 year of research. You're producing a thesis out of that at the end of the year. Alternatively, if you're not doing your honors year, you could be doing a postgraduate course, a research, postgraduate, a master's of philosophy, and then try and transition that into a PhD. So I've seen many students who have, say, for example, done a bachelor's and then have gone into doing a master's of philosophy. The master's of philosophy is going well, and they've changed the master's of philosophy to a PhD. So that is also a possibility. But you have to show that you've got some experience in undertaking research. If you don't show that, then it's going to be very difficult to then get an admission or just sort of get an admission into a PhD.
Got it. Makes sense. A few more queries on. So we have a lot of queries. I think we have 10 minutes to go. We'll try to cover as many as possible. So let's jump into it right away. The query is on after 12. So is it better to do in Australia and New Zealand? Looks like a very general query on bachelor's, but is there a suggestion that you would have for students who are looking for these two geographies as to what to choose? Any preferences or any?
Yeah, so I think this will come down to those points that I had on one of the slides that, how to choose an appropriate institution. I think there's several things that you've got to consider. Whether you choose Australia and New Zealand, they both have institutions, they both have universities or colleges that are ranked quite well globally. They are ranked, some of them ranked in the top 20 according to the QS rankings that I mentioned before. So competing against, the other top universities as well. So I think you've got to factor in the living and spending costs as well. Like, how much is it going to cost you to live in a particular city and fund your studies, and how much is it going to cost you to study as well? So I think once you know that you're, like, in terms of budgeting and whatnot, you are then able to then make a better decision. Again, I think that's one important aspect. And the other important aspect is the ranking, whether it's the university, whether it's the faculty, whether it's the field or area. And again, that comes down to the QS ranking, the website on your screen right now. So those are the things that I would sort of encourage you to look at before making a decision. Yeah. Shehzad, anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that and about the course as well, right? I mean, how good the faculty is, because that also matters a lot for some people, at least, But many times what I've seen is that degree is a degree, and the work experience is, then it just takes over after that. So it gives you an entry into the working life.
Right. A few more queries. These are more course specific. So is New Zealand good for aerospace engineering? Are there scopes for careers in sports management in Australia? Would this be the right moment to talk about these questions, or are they too specific?
They're probably too specific. I think they would need to contact us. I think they would first need to do research, see what when they're sort of looking at the universities and sort of course degrees and what are the job opportunities. Have a look there first, and then if there's still not enough information, reach out to us, and then we can try and I guess guide you and give you some direction as well.
Got it. So it looks like a lot of queries related to course. Before the people on this webinar, they direct a good amount of research has to be done by them, because this queries will itself take a lot of time for the education board to research and give answers to. The best way to look for answers would be on the web. And we would highly recommend people on the other side of the screen to do their research before reaching out, because it'll just help them do it faster. And the best way to do this is to experience it yourself. So before sharing in queries, do think about it. If there's already information out there, because a lot of information is already out there. Right. So the next query is again about from a parent. so New Zealand is where they have their relatives and their daughter visits Auckland once in a year. Can she work on any project for her exposure on environmental studies or dairy studies? Looks like somebody who wants to get external exposure. So if I'm just visiting, am I allowed to work? Am I allowed to experience internships and so on for a visitor?
I think this would come down to visa requirements. I think that's something that you have to look at, because I wonder how, like, I'm assuming it's a high school student.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, because it would be explicitly stated in the visa as to what the daughter can and can't do as to the requirements, because I wouldn't know off the top of my head. Shehzad, anything that you'd like to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, every visa condition, they specifically mention if you have working rights or not. So it really depends on the visa, isn't it?
Yeah.
Got it. Right. Next query looks like is something that the whole world is running behind. Is what is the scope of studying MBA in Australia?
What is the scope of studying an MBA?
MBA. Yes.
Oh geez, it's a very specific question. I think, look, there are a lot of people who are studying an MBA here in Australia and New Zealand. Shehzad, anything that you'd like to comment on from more of a business side of things?
I was personally thinking of doing an MBA sometime in the future, but I just never got to it because I mean it depends. I mean, when you're in your working life, right? And then does it align with your goals? I mean, do you already reach a certain level, and then after that you want to really go into, you know, like the management of the business and, you know, those higher roles? That's where you would need MBA. So I think it's a personal choice. It's at the end, but a lot of people do MBA here. I know them, and it has greatly benefited their careers to move up the ladder in the work experience life. So definitely.
Got it. Looks like, again, something that this people will have to research about and would be very, very specific. But of course, MBA is a degree that everybody looks forward to. It's just that the requirements and the time when you want to do it differs. So moving on, there are two queries on people who, so before their 12th grade, if they want to move to Australia as an IB student, somebody who's studying in the Haka Academy, Hyderabad, is in the 9th grade and wants to move to Australia or New Zealand, what would the requirements be? That's one. And second is for an IB student where English is the language of communication by teachers and so on. Is it still required to give an English language exam? Two queries on, or yeah.
So that's more for high school students. That's an interesting query. The short answer is I'm not entirely sure, because a lot of the research that we have done is more post-secondary, is more tertiary. I would have to get back to them. I'd have to actually do my own research and get back to them on what the requirements are. In terms of, I guess, yeah, I mean, Shehzad, unless you have some insight into that, I would just say that I'd have to get back to them and do my own research and then sort of give them a definitive response.
Yeah, high school, not my area.
Right, sure. I think they can always reach out to us on the link that we'll soon share on the screen, and we'll probably try to reach out to them on that. But commendable to see that there are people who are thinking about it and in their 9th and 10th grade, so which becomes important on when you need to start thinking if you want to migrate.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as I said earlier, the earlier that you start thinking, the better it is. The more opportunities, the better it is for you in the long term.
Right. So there are a few queries on better fields for jobs in future, IT, business management. Again, a general question for Australia and New Zealand. So would you have any Do we have this information on the slide with respect to where most of the people work? We can probably share that. Or in general, what do you feel are the fields that people usually who migrate into Australia and New Zealand go into?
So I think we had the statistic about a lot of international students are studying management and commerce. And then in New Zealand, we've also got engineering as well as another particular area. From an Ismaili perspective, a lot of our Jamaat is predominantly either in IT, accounting, finance, healthcare. And when I say healthcare, predominantly in nursing. And I see engineering starting to come up, but that's from our Jamaati context. From a wider context, we have given some information in the guides that we have shared. So there's much more information about what are sort of the up and coming fields, where the jobs are in demand for both in Australia and New Zealand. I would suggest that that person, again, reach out to you guys to sort of share that guide with them to get that full scope.
Right. Got it. And this question might be more relevant to you because it's morely on the healthcare side of things. So an Indian physical therapist wants to work in Australia. What are the prospects?
Again, a very specific question. Look, I think that person would have to contact us to sort of see if we can connect them with someone appropriate in the Jamaat to sort of let them know what the prospects are. It's very difficult off the top of our head to sort of say that, oh, yes, there are, or no, there aren't.
Right. So what I'll do is the next few queries are a little specific. So I'll probably read that out. If you feel it is specific, you can say it's slightly specific and would require more research, and we can probably move on. Totally understand that this domains would be very, very vast, and one person or two people having this information is totally not possible. So the next query is on early childhood care and education in New Zealand. So education gap required and any age criteria. Would this be a specific question or should be?
It is a specific question, but there's no age requirement. I mean, there are many people who do work in early childhood development, are young or old, both in Australia and New Zealand. So a lot of pretty much our entire, if we look at from an education board perspective, our ECD board member who has ECD members and the teachers who are there, they're all trained in one shape or another, are professionally accredited or getting trained in that area of early childhood development. And they work in a professional environment, and they're all of different ages. So I don't see a minimum or a maximum age around that.
Got it. Sure. Makes sense. A few more queries on PR specific, but looks like the intention is directly to look at PR. And I would like to reiterate what you said, that we are not here to help migration or help with the process. We'll only facilitate it. So if there's a very PR specific question, I think the consultants would be the best people to answer. But just a heads up for people, the consultants don't come in cheap. If you want to get in and work with them, it would require a lot of financing as well. So the best way to find answers would be to look for online forums, look do your own research before you engage with consultants as well. So just a heads up there. Yes. There was one query. So I'm in my last year of mechanical engineering. What are the scopes for MS and PhD in a math or stat degree in Australia and New Zealand? How are jobs there for professor? Looks like a good question for Shehzad sir, who's right now in mechatronics. So over to you, whoever wants to take it.
Look, engineering is not or let's say manufacturing. If you think of manufacturing, right, Australia is a relatively smaller market than let's say Europe or America, but there is still a big scope of engineering here, like especially in current times when you have this COVID and there are shortage of engineers. So a lot of companies are actually grabbing any local resource that they can find, and people are getting jobs pretty quickly. So but it always changes. Previously, when there were a lot of people migrating, it was difficult to get jobs, but now it's different. So, but there's always scope for mechanical engineering. There are a lot of companies here that actually do mechanical engineering. So it's definitely worth to explore that.
The last two queries for the day before we close this, again, is on PR, but maybe a little bit more general. So is there a ballpark in terms of what a local, somebody who's a local resident in Australia pays for education versus what a international student pays? So any ballpark there? Would it be 10% cheaper, 25% cheaper? What was the difference?
It varies from course to course, but Shehzad, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, it really does vary from course to course. If you look at something like a vocational institute or a college, so there was one time when I looked at the early childhood course for someone, and being a local compared to international, there was roughly I think it was 3 times that an international student would have to pay.
Wow.
So it's a massive gap, but it definitely varies from course to course and university to university. So this is just very general, out there kind of response.
Yeah. So one thing that I'll add to that is that what happens is that when it comes to undergraduate degrees, for domestic students, they're subsidized by the government, whereas international students are paying the full fee plus more, which is why there's such a significant gap. Whereas with a master's degree, a master's coursework that is, for domestic students, the degree is not subsidized. So you'll see not as much of a gap for international students and domestic students when it comes to a master's coursework degree. There is a gap, but not as much. And again, it will vary from degree to degree.
Got it. Got it. Looks like that answers this as well. And yeah, this is again a slightly specific query, but opportunities for Cambridge ASA level curriculum comparatively to others. I don't understand what that is, but if
Yep.
you guys do.
Yeah, so that's a curriculum that is on offer in Australia and New Zealand, more predominantly in New Zealand. I haven't seen too much of it here in Australia. So what it is that, say for example, if I take New Zealand as an example, you have years 1 to years 13 as your schooling years. And then I believe in years 10, 11, 12, and 13, you'll undertake the Cambridge level, or you'll have the New Zealand standard, which is the NCEA, which is what they call it. And there's also the IB being, again, a little bit different. So the curriculum itself is different or is similar, and it's taught in a different way. The opportunities are the same. When you're trying to apply for a university or anything like that, there's no discrepancy as to, does one perform better than the other when it comes to New Zealand, whether you're looking at Cambridge or whether you're looking at NCEA. So again, NCEA is the New Zealand national curriculum that they have. From what we've seen and from the experience that we've had after discussions with students from New Zealand. Again, as I said, in Australia, Cambridge is not very common. They generally go for the standard state-wise curriculum. So each state has their own curriculum, and they're fairly synonymous to each other across the different states. And then they have a national ATAR, which is the Australian Tertiary Admission Ranking. And that allows you to then go into university, and the Cambridge score is also, I guess, translated into a standard ATAR to then get admission into university. So I hope that answers that question.
That I'm sure at least it gives a good amount of info to think about. I think with that, we end our questions. Now I think the floor is open. We are concluding the webinar. So thanks a lot for all the attendees for joining in and giving in time and sharing questions. And thanks a lot, Nazim sir and Shehzad sir, for patiently answering all of those queries, specific, non-specific, everything in the world. Thank you so much. Any last parting thoughts that you would want to leave the students with?
I would say, look, thank you once again for the opportunity to sort of give us to share this information with the Jamaat there. We hope that you found it useful. We hope that, we hope to see you in the next few webinars that we look to deliver. And inshallah, I hope to see you here in Australia and New Zealand in the very near future as well, post-COVID, of course. I would just say and reiterate what I think Sonu had sort of very well said, was that, be adaptable, be willing to sort of not come in with a fixed set of ideas or ideologies, but come in with the ability to sort of adapt and change with the current climate that it is.
And I would just say that, do a lot of research, and when you think you've done your research, do a bit more.
I think that's well said. There's always more research that's required. Of course, especially if you're migrating, it's not an easy job. So it makes a lot of sense. And yes, so with that, we conclude the webinar. And for people who have hanged on till the end, we have shared the list, the links, if you want to share queries with us, and we probably will direct you to the team in New Zealand and Australia accordingly. So we have 3 links. If I have to explain, the first is regular career help desk, which is the regular any queries that you have with respect to India and courses and so on, you can use that. The second one is more to do with Udan help desk, which is study abroad. Today, a lot of queries which probably you want more answers to, you can raise your queries there. And the third is a Telegram group. So this group is where we share all our career updates. All the material that you see right now would be eventually be shared on that group. So please do join the Telegram group as well. Nazim sir, in the start of the presentation, had mentioned about a few guidebooks. All of that would be shared in due course on the Telegram group. So please join in. And the presentation and the recording of this webinar also will be shared again in a couple of weeks. So thank you so much for joining in. And with that, we end the webinar. Ya Ali Madad to everybody, and hope everybody stays safe.
Thanks everyone, Ya Ali Madad. And
Madad.
please do complete the evaluation that's been posted on the group chat as well, just to give us some feedback.
Yeah. Awesome. Nazim sir, would we have the Haka dance now?
I think we're still recording. Get the videographer to edit it out.
I think Anis, you can we end the webinar and the panelists stay?
Yes, Anis, please do so. End the webinar, but let the panelists be on.
Okay.
Okay. So it was wonderful, very informative, very systematic, and well organized.
Are we still live?
I think we still have the attendees.
Oh.
Then they still think that we're doing the Haka, but no.